Okay, first lesson of any of this, always check your camera before you start recording. I just recorded a whole session, which pretty much went up to here. So take two. Okay, so I wanted to address a slightly more complicated, more difficult topic in this video, and that's the difficulties of living abroad. Because, doesn't matter, who you are, you're going to encounter some problems, some things you need to work on, some obstacles to overcome, they can be small hurdles, they can be massive, massive problems. But end of the day, if you want to continue living in that country and you want to have a healthy, productive life, you need to address these issues. So I start from the top of the list, which is kind of, it maybe doesn't set in at the beginning because, when you first move to a country, you have this kind of adrenaline rush and you're excited and you're like, ooh, wow, everything's new. I'm meeting all these new people. I've got all these new responsibilities. It can get a bit intense and, it's like a holiday, effectively, when you first move to a new place. But after a certain amount of time, you start to, of course, miss some of the things at home. So, you miss your family, you miss your friends, you miss, maybe certain, foods, luxuries, even just like, little things you took for granted. So, how I address that, firstly, I try to have regular calls with my parents over Skype. We'll talk maybe, once a week, ideally, sometimes once a fortnight if, we're busy. Exchange messages through Messenger, just to make sure that my parents know that I'm still alive and that I'm doing well. And of course that I know that they're doing okay as well. And, I was often technical support at home. So, occasionally I'll give advice on, this is probably what's wrong with your iPod. Have you Googled this? Blah, blah, blah. And I was very lucky with my parents because they've always been there for me. They've always supported my decisions. They've always, tried to help me wherever I needed help, to give advice, to, help with finance. They've really done everything they can to help me, and I've always been very grateful for that. And likewise with friends, I've got some, wonderful friends back home, and like saying goodbye to them was difficult, but at the same time, I knew that I needed to do something else with my life, and, they've been supportive in that. And I had one of them come over to visit, a few months ago. And before, he was a bit skeptical. It's like, really, why do you want to live in Poland? Why can't you just come home? Why can't you just hang out with the lads? And after a few days, he suddenly started to see what I see. He was like, okay, I get it, I see why you want to live here. But likewise, you can keep good contact, through Facebook, through WhatsApp, through Skype, whatever. It's always worth hanging on to the people that, kind of mean the most to you in life. So I've also, you may have seen in some of my videos, I have quite a few decorations. So I brought a lot of random trinkets from home to make my accommodation feel more like home. So yeah, I used to be, and probably still am in many levels, a bit of a geek. So, I love Transformers growing up, Batman, stuff like that. And I kind of, I still have a place in my heart for them, but they don't kind of rule what I, my interests anymore. But, I'll always have space for them. So, I brought various bits and pieces on every trip home, I fill a suitcase with stuff. It's like, right, bringing that back to Warsaw. Okay, so what else? So language is definitely, in a country like this, it's a massive burden. So when you want to go shopping, like say you've got a recipe and you're like, I need this ingredient, this ingredient, this ingredient. You have to translate that. If you want to buy the exact ingredients you want, you have to know what they are. Likewise, if you have friends out here, or colleagues, naturally they prefer to speak their own language. It's only natural, right? I mean, in the UK, it's not very often that we would suddenly burst into French or German, if we have friends from that country, unless we happen to be fluent at the language. But sometimes it can be difficult. In the office, you'll hear people talking around you, and you'll hear them having a laugh, having a joke, and you're like, I have no idea what they're talking about. And you kind of feel a little bit left out. And it's not intentional on their side, it's perfectly natural, but you do feel, I would love to be, part of that conversation. And, the same thing happens on nights out. People will slip into Polish and you have to kind of like raise your hands, which us Brits are not very good at doing. I have a Spanish colleague, Ignacio, who's very outspoken on this topic. He can understand a lot of Polish. He's been going to lessons and things like that. But still, when people are sort of speaking Polish around him, he will speak up for himself, and quite forthrightly so. Which is difficult when you're a Brit, because we're not very good at that, at least traditionally. Maybe this is something I need to be more assertive on. But how can you deal with that? I mean, other than giving up and just like relying on Google Translate, you can actually try and learn. So I've started. For the last few months, I've been using Duolingo. I've tried a couple of other apps, but this is the one that seems to be the best fit for me. It kind of makes it into a game. It's repetitive, and it helps. It's not perfect because it never explains anything. It's just like, right, this means this sentence means this, fill in the blanks, blah, blah, blah. But eventually you kind of figure out some of the logic as you go along. But Polish, I mean, wow. It's like the most complicated language in the world, they say, next to Chinese, or some people would even say it's more complex than Chinese. Some words can have like 15 different endings depending on how you want to use them. One word can mean multiple things. And yeah, the words aren't easy. The alphabet is slightly different, so different letters can have different sounds. You have like accents and lines and thingies that, denotes, rather than an it's an on, for example. And, so navigating your way around that, I mean, like an L with a line through it is like a W, like a W. So like there's a beer here, like Perla, I kept calling it, and like I got the strangest looks from people in the bar. It's like, Perla? Perwa. It's one of those weird L's, and then suddenly they're like, of course. But it's funny, like a lot of the time, maybe like you're listening to somebody from another country and they're not pronouncing, words in English 100% correctly. But that's because their alphabet is different. It's not because they can't do it, it's because it's just they've been taught a different way to do it. So don't judge. And besides, anyone who speaks more than one language, I envy. And I'm surrounded by these people. But you can also go to tandem groups, they're quite common. You can sign up for courses. And of course, friends will help out in little ways here and there if you have questions or you want something translated. You just want them to read that latest text message you had from the bank to know if it's a problem or not. So there's that side. Okay, so other problems, talking banks, is finance, of course. So I, lived at home for the first 19 years of my life, and then I was a student for kind of 4 years, and then I had 4 years where I was kind of living like a student, though technically earning money. But I was, saving money by like living in shared accommodation and stuff like that. And everyone else handled the bills. I just paid the money. The moment you kind of live on your own, suddenly everything becomes your responsibility. You have to make sure you take care of the rent. You have to pay all your bills. You have to take care of any little financial burden that comes your way. You rip a pair of jeans, you need to buy a new pair of jeans, that kind of thing. So you have to learn to budget a little bit, which I'm still working on, admittedly. I kind of live month to month right now. But at the same time, I maybe kind of overdo it sometimes on the socializing, which I really enjoy. But at the same time, yeah, you keep going out, you're going to keep spending money. So I need to calm down and find cheaper alternatives for recreation, which I'm working on. You got to sign up to a bank here. I went with Millennium, mainly because they're an easy one for foreigners to use. There are a number of other banks that people recommended, but with them everything was quite straightforward. They even have a call center in English, which is ideal. Because if you're talking about finance and stuff like that, you want to be speaking your own language, unless you're fluent. Okay, so other than that, you can have issues with accommodation. So when I first moved here, work basically supported me in an Airbnb flat for a few months, which can have problems, like a bit embarrassing, but the toilet broke on the first day, basically. And I contacted the owner and I didn't really get any sign of a plumber for a few weeks, which meant I was kind of using public bathrooms and the work bathroom a lot more than any normal person should. And I learned that if you want to use a free bathroom and you haven't got access to the office, go to a shopping centre. Anywhere else, you're probably going to pay a couple of zloty. And if you haven't got the change, you're a bit screwed. Yeah, so it can be difficult. Like I had my washing machine break the other day, contacted the landlord. But luckily now I've got a more serious landlord and he was like, okay, contact this handyman. So we got this guy on site, Piotr. He came round and, give him a few bob and, he fixed it. No problems. So the solutions are a little bit more practical, a little less formal here in Poland. That's one thing you'll find. Okay, so what other difficulties have I had? Bureaucracy was the first problem, and so obviously you have to register here, so you have to go to the government's office and fill in paperwork, and then you have to go away and get other paperwork and then come back, and every time you move house here you need to let the local authorities know and that kind of thing. So that can be difficult, and it reminds me of a film that I loved when I was a kid called The 12 Tasks of Asterix. And one of his tasks is he basically has to go into this giant bureaucrat's office and get one form. And he goes from desk, they send it to another desk, they send it to another floor, and you just get this, animation of him like racing around the building. And it felt a little bit like that. It's like, oh no, you have to have this paperwork. Oh, it has to be signed. Oh, you need to have this printed. And, after a while, you just go a little bit insane. One bit of advice is, in these offices, especially in Poland, they don't always speak English, which could be a problem. I got lucky on a couple of occasions, but on the whole, if you have somebody that can go with you, it will make your life a lot easier to deal with. I will say that. Okay, and that kind of brings me on to, a couple of more personal points. So when you're kind of living, on your own, doesn't have to be abroad, but I think when you're abroad in a, Polish speaking country or foreign speaking country, it can maybe double down. But you can feel a bit lonely. Uh, there's no escaping that. You know, because especially in my case where I've always lived with someone else, whether it be my family, whether it be with friends, or random students. Um, you always have somebody there that you can talk to, somebody there to rely on, someone that's just there. And when you're living alone, yeah, that can take a bit of getting used to, especially when you're single. And so, yeah, I mean, I tried dating here in Poland quite a lot, actually, a lot more than in the UK. But then again, I'm from a part of the country where you easily have more men than women, and most of the women, yeah, I'll just say demographically, it's not very suited if you're a single male. But in Warsaw, it's like London. You've got lots of people, Polish women, generally very, very beautiful, very intelligent, and good to talk to. So yeah, dating here can be quite interesting. And, so I've met a number of people in my 2 years here. And first and foremost, it's not necessarily just about finding someone, because this is what a lot of people are like, okay, I'm going to go dating, I'm going to find my life partner. It can be dangerous to think that way. I've learned this from experience. I used to get very attached very quickly, and now I'm kind of a bit more calm, at least working on that. And, sometimes it's just about meeting someone new, having an interesting conversation, perhaps trying a new place or doing a new activity. And, make it fun for yourself. If it's fun for you, hopefully it'll be fun for them. So, dating's a good way to get out there and meet new people. And, I've actually stayed in contact with a couple of the girls I've met, made some good friends there. And, it's the more contacts you have in a place like this, especially kind of contacts, from outside of work, the more comfortable you feel, the more options you have, and I don't know, the more depth you have to the whole experience. So yeah, I tried the usual things: Tinder, Bumble, OkCupid. I'd be honest, I hate the modern dating scene. I'm a bit more, I prefer to kind of get to know someone and before kind of the dating thing, but it's trial and error at the end of the day. I mean, I have had my heart broken a couple of times here in Poland, but you just have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, take a long, hard look at yourself and think, where did it go wrong? What can you improve? Is there something you need to address? And yeah, so what are some of the other ways of kind of tackling loneliness out here? So one thing I relied on a lot when I first moved here was, my colleagues. I work in a fairly big department, pretty young team, and they would generally, be quite active. So, go out for drinks. Yeah, mainly going out for drinks, maybe go to the cinema occasionally. So that was pretty cool to hang out with them, and I still do. I seem to be the main person that organises social events out here. I don't know how that burden fell onto the foreigner, but maybe I'm the only one who cares. I wonder sometimes. But the thing is, you can't always rely on colleagues. For a start, everyone has their own lives. People have families, people, perhaps don't feel as sociable during the winter. When it's cold outside, who really wants to be out there? And at times like this, after Christmas, everyone's feeling the pinch a little bit. So, trying to organise a big night can be a bit challenging. So what are some of the other things you can do? So firstly, there's stuff for yourself, because a lot of loneliness, I don't, it isn't necessarily the absence of people. You can feel lonely in a crowd of people. Loneliness is sometimes, not being happy with your own company. And that's something that you have to work on. And, there are a lot of ways, exercise, reading, taking up new hobbies, doing a bit of traveling. I mean, I love to walk around, for example, and explore. I know the city pretty well, and I can get to most places on foot, where people would probably think I was a little crazy for traveling that way. But I like the fresh air. I like the exercise. Um, but there are other things you can do as well. So there's a community that I discovered a couple of weeks ago called Yedl. I think they're pretty much exclusive to Poland. I might be wrong there. And they do organise a lot of activities. So I went playing badminton the other week, and I went to a quiz the other night. Took some colleagues from work, put a team together, and yes, quizzes are not always as easy as you hope they'll be. But we had fun. This is the main thing. But they do all kinds of other activities, lots of sporting things and board game things and chess things and that kind of thing. So definitely I'm going to be doing more activities with them. And the great thing is it's so cheap. You pay like 24 zloty a month, and a lot of the events are covered. So you're paying basically like £5 a month, and you've got like almost unlimited. They have events going virtually every day if you're that keen to get out there. So there are other expat communities like Internations, which I haven't really tried yet. But that's another good way to meet people. And then of course, there are the little things like, Netflix, Facebook, gaming, that kind of thing, which can distract your mind, but is ultimately probably not too productive. You do what you can sometimes. But effectively, with this video, I just wanted to kind of illustrate some of the challenges that, I've been through, that other people are undoubtedly going through, when they move to a new city or a new country. Life isn't easy, but if it was easy, it would be boring, right? So I hope you found this useful. If you've gone through challenges of your own, feel free to comment. If you have any kind of words of advice for people out there in this situation, or for me, I'm always willing to listen to advice, then please do share. But again, thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this. Feel free to subscribe. And yeah, I'll try and think of more things to be interesting or helpful or just weird. We'll see. I can be wacky if I have to be. Okay, but thank you very much. Good night, and take care.